to Parents Anonymous podcast. I'm Tal,
Hi, I'm Rupali.
and today we're going to be covering labor, stages 3 and 4 in a natural delivery.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't caught our last episode, make sure you tune in for that one. There's a lot of information in there and our experience with the first and second stage of labor with our daughter. And then this second part is really the after, what happens afterwards. So if you're just listening from the last one, as you know, we shared our daughter was born, and as soon as she was delivered, she was on my chest, and both of us were happy and emotional at the same time. We both let out some tears, and after, I feel like, I had her on my chest and I could really just be grounded again, and I just felt completely at peace. And I know that you took a picture of me as I had her on my chest, and I was just, my eyes were closed and I was just smiling as
Yeah.
tears were falling down.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is that love that you feel for this person that you worked really hard creating in your womb for 9 months. The whole process, even though for us it started at 3 in the morning and then at 9:41, like you mentioned, she was born that same day. The exhaustion was setting in, for you especially. You did amazing, uh, doing those pushes and fighting through those contractions and that process. And then I was just really happy. I was overwhelmed with just all these different emotions of like, oh my God, goodness, our first kid, our beautiful daughter, um, and everything's just rushing through your mind of the last 12 to 18 hours of what we had gone through, and it's just it happens in the moment. You don't really think about it, and now a little over 3 years later, we're talking about it in a form like this. It brings back a lot of those emotions and feelings, and I'm so thankful for our daughter today, and she's such a beautiful person already. And having that labor, you were healthy, she was healthy, and everything happened according to our plan, which is with labor and childbirth, it doesn't always go to plan.
Yeah.
You really manifested and wanted a natural birth, and I was just really happy that you were able to have that, achieve that, and yeah. So today we're gonna kind of talk about some of the other elements of labor.
Yeah, really the aftercare for mom and baby, and what are some tests that happen, and what are the things looking like for that next bit. And really a huge sense of relief for us after she was born. I feel like everything afterwards you just kind of can't really focus on, because here's your child,
Yeah.
crying and with you as one. So one of the first things that happened after she was on my chest, and obviously you could hear her crying, so she's healthy and she's okay. Tal got the privilege of cutting the cord.
Do you mind mentioning for our viewers, and sometimes new parents look it up, the cord clamping, and what that looks like?
Yeah, so the umbilical cord, which attaches the placenta to the baby, there is, over the years, there's been research done about delayed cord clamping.
Mm.
So making sure that all the nutrients, everything that, needs to go to the baby as is there before we rush to really clamp or shut off that nutrition and
That flow,
oxygen and
yeah.
all of that flow to the baby.
So there's different schools of thought, but generally it's usually a minute, 2 minutes, where they'll wait after a baby's been delivered, and then they'll put a little clamp on it, kind of like a closed clip, and then they'll allow the person to go and officially cut that cord.
Yeah.
So quite a privilege, like you mentioned, and an honor to, you know, have the cord and officially welcome our daughter into this world. And so the nurse helped me. She gave me some scissors. She said, "Would you like a picture taken?" I said, "Yes, please." Gave her my phone, and then I was able to cut her cord. And then there's a little clamp that kind of just sticks out from the belly button from our daughter, and we'll talk about that care in another episode as well. But yeah, that was a beautiful thing, and I'm very blessed to have cut her.
Yeah. And with the skin to skin, it's also really important, but most important in the first, weeks of your baby's life. That skin to skin is just really reminding that baby that mom is close by, and that smell, the heartbeat, all the things that the baby was listening to, it's still really close and it's home
Mhm.
for that baby. So that skin to skin is extremely important. And we did want to make sure that we do delayed cord clamping as well as skin to
Yeah.
skin.
Yeah, very important. There's pheromones, hormones, all the above. So even for Rapali, post delivery, having that baby, that love, that oxytocin release in the body, the happy hormone. So that's really good for Rapali's recovery and help kind of regulate some of those hormone drop offs and that flush of the system essentially. So it's good for the bonding of it, and then also a baby who's been inside her mother's womb for 9 months has now got to learn to regulate body temperature on the outside world. So
Yeah.
helps
Yeah.
with all of that.
So
Yeah.
after the first, little bit that she was on my chest and after the cord was cut, they did take her away for a few minutes. And during that time, they were really checking multiple things, her length, her weight, all of the scores and checks that they need to do. And there's a certain number that the baby has to score to make sure everything looks good developmentally and
Hmm.
all of that. So after they had done all that, she was really good to go. And then once she was cleaned up a little bit and wrapped up and had her little toque on, then she was passed to Tal to hold for the first time. There was things happening for me during that time as well. But before we get to that, anything to add when it comes to all of the checks for her?
Yeah, they look at the weight. So I got to take a picture of her first weigh-in. That was really neat. It was in grams, and just seeing, through pregnancy, they weigh her with ultrasound. And we did mention in a previous episode that in her case, she had a velamentous cord insertion. So we weren't really sure how big she was going to be. So that was really neat to see as well. And just seeing the nurses doing their checks is just in its own very interesting to see. Again, I mentioned earlier episodes, I love science and just seeing what that looks like afterwards and cleaning her up. There's a little coating that's on her skin that helps protect it. So, you want to kind of leave that on as long as possible as well. And then just trying to like right away, you start thinking, does she look like me? Does she look like, Rapali? I hope she looks like Rapali and not me. And it's just a rush of emotion. So, yeah.
Yeah. And if you haven't caught our episode on pregnancy and the velamentous cord, we do talk about that. So make sure you catch that. And it was actually determined that there was a velamentous cord insertion in our daughter's case. And when they did her weight, they were shocked to see that she was less than 5 pounds.
Yeah, she was 4 pounds, 13 ounces to be exact. And they had told us via the ultrasound that she's around the 6 pound mark.
Yeah.
So just so you know, if you're currently pregnant and you're following along and you're doing ultrasounds, there is a little margin of error, plus or minus a pound or two, right? So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and thankfully, obviously when we first heard that her weight was less than 5 pounds, it was a little bit scary, but only for a moment because once they did all the checks, she was actually scored 100% on all of the tests that she needed to. So thankfully, she did not have to stay in the NICU because, sometimes when that weight, when it's that right at that margin, that could have been very real possibility for us that she would
Yeah.
have to have a bit of a stay in the NICU. But as shared, that she was well and good right from
Yeah.
when, right from the get go. And then for me, there was a few things afterwards. So once she was delivered, the cord was cut. I delivered the placenta, which after the placenta was delivered, that's when it was confirmed that it was indeed a velamentous cord insertion, which initially they said this might be the case, but they never really said to us for sure if I did have that or not. The placenta was delivered, and then after that, I did have a second degree tear. So during the pushing process, I mean, I didn't know. I was, busy trying to push the baby to the best of my ability. And during that time, because the pain is high, considering this is a natural birth, and at that point it was an unmedicated birth, I didn't obviously feel that pain. But really, afterwards, when they were stitching, I could definitely feel the pain. And at that point, I did use the laughing gas just to help relax me a little bit. I don't know if it did much, but it's just something that, distracts you a little bit so that
Yeah.
you're just breathing into something and hoping it kind of helps. But at that point, because the process was over, there was so much relief and, we had seen our daughter, everything was good. I was okay. So I did have a second degree tear that they stitched, and really the stitches dissolved very quickly after that, and I recovered really well, physically speaking. And after that, really, it's a couple of checks overnight that happen when it comes to checking on the uterus and making sure that the uterus is slowly decreasing in size. That's really important
Hmm.
that they keep an eye on that and they check that. And then obviously my blood pressure and my vital signs and all of that. I didn't require any IV fluids or anything else through my IV after that.
No. And I do want to mention Rapali is probably one of the most hydrated people that I know and generally. So it's always important to really intake those fluids, especially before, uh, hopefully during labor, a little bit here and there, and after as well. And then the nursing staff were great taking care of Rapali and providing stuff like pads and stuff because after delivery, especially natural delivery, there still might be like discharge of
Yeah.
stuff, especially after the delivery of the placenta. There could be mucus, blood, and all that kind of stuff. So they'll provide, and as a partner, my job was just to make sure if that pad needed to be replaced, check in with Rapali how she's doing, and at the same time, now my duty as a father is just making sure baby's being fed and she's okay, warm, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And after really everyone left the room. It was just me, you, and our daughter. After that, we finally got a chance to have some food.
Yes, I still remember that meal to this day.
It was perfect. And really, for me, afterwards, when it comes to symptoms and all of that, I really didn't have much, to be honest. I was up and about, had mild pain when it comes to, the stitches, but otherwise, I really was okay. I was doing really well afterwards. Of course, there is, sometimes as the fatigue starts to kick in, it's important to sleep and rest, and which is what we did. But when it comes to me being up and about and moving, there was no issues really with me
No.
for that.
Yeah, they encourage some movement, just again, making sure she's not feeling lightheaded and stuff like that, especially potentially if there's any blood loss, which in our case there wasn't. So just Rapali kind of knows her limits. I might just be there in case she needs a hand getting in and out of the bed. I do want to preface that during this time it was COVID. Like we were kind
Yeah.
of in the second wave, I believe, right, of COVID.
Yeah.
So at our hospital, family weren't really allowed to come. So I do want to mention to those people, like that's something that might be in your discussion
Yes.
before delivery, maybe even during pregnancy. And we've mentioned almost every episode that having a plan in place, either written down or just a verbal communication that what you guys want. If your family, they're excited, they want to be there for you guys, and they might be messaging you throughout. But I told mine, hey, I will let you folks know once we're ready and we know what's going on or we're finally comfortable. And by the time our daughter was born, we mentioned 9:41. After that, we're looking at 10:30 at night now. We're starting to settle in. We're exhausted, especially Rapali, super exhausted. And then decide what's the right time for you to tell your family because they're gonna want to call and congratulate you. So for us, we waited a bit just to make sure we were good first. Our baby was good before we let our family know that she had been born.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important to discuss because, again, being on the other side, when you have, eventually we did have people in our circle have babies, being on the other side, you are so excited to see that baby and check on the mom. And for us, it was really important, again, being through the experience ourselves that, again, yes, we're excited to see the baby, but remember there's limits and there's checks and don't forget the mom and the dad. All those things are really important because you don't want to just focus on that baby, right? There's a lot of work that mom did to get that baby to the other side.
Exactly. Yeah. So after settling in, we had our meal that was tasted amazing, especially after post delivery. You're just in a celebratory mode. We had DoorDash delivered to the hospital. That was perfect, especially during COVID times. Our daughter was doing great, and then yeah, we're moving into the night. So at that point, I checked in with the nurse. She said, "Yeah, you guys are gonna be here overnight. We're gonna do some initial tests on your daughter, so they take blood work to see if everything looks good. They check for the lungs, so they use the stethoscope, make sure breathing is good, heart rate's good, check on Rapali, like she mentioned, all the different vitals that they took, and they're going to take throughout the night as well. They'll, help us with the feeding part, and Rapali will talk about what we decided to do for feeding when it came to, breastfeeding and stuff like that. And then, yeah, diaper changes. That'll be my main focus. I'd been practicing for the past few weeks on how to change a diaper. It's a acquired skill. So Yeah, during that night, I was given a little mattress for the floor and some, Rapali laughs, but dad lives matter too, But no, I'm just kidding. I was just happy to be there with our daughter and Rapali. Yeah, so we were getting ready for the night.
Yeah, and so for us, after things kind of settled down, there wasn't once the nurses did kind of their final checks, they did thankfully leave us alone, me as well as our daughter, because we needed that well-deserved rest as we talk about. And for the first night, I had her right beside my bed in the bassinet. And then, as Tal shared, he was on the floor resting. And then the next morning, all the blood work for her came back and all through the checks and everything like that, we did have to stay an extra night in the hospital.
Yeah,
So that first night that she was born, as we shared with you at 9:41 p.m., we did stay overnight that night, obviously, but we did stay an extra night for a few reasons. One, again, considering her size, because she was less than 5 pounds, they wanted to ensure that she has a really well feeding schedule. And then also to ensure that her bilirubin was normal.
and so the bilirubin is a molecule that's associated with your liver. So they look at that level, and she was slightly, they call it jaundice. She might have a little bit more of a yellow appearance. Her eyes, the whites of the eyes will be yellow, and so they want to make sure that those bilirubin levels are at the appropriate mark, and knowing that the baby's healthy. But just know that majority of babies, if you look at numbers sake, have some sort of jaundice to them. It's completely normal. The side effects are they're just a little bit more sleepier than your normal baby that doesn't have jaundice.
Yeah.
It's just the liver. It's just underdeveloped, like everything else in a baby, like kidneys, stuff like that. So it just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty normal, as you
Yeah,
shared.
yeah,
Not normal, common. Very,
common.
very
Yeah,
common.
yeah,
So just something for us that we had to stay an extra night for.
yeah. So after that, during that night, we had to feed. We were feeding her as well every a few hours. Ideally, I think they say 2 hours.
Yeah, every 2 to 3 hours, really, you want to try to do that as much as possible. And for her, for our daughter, I was breastfeeding. So, yeah, so making sure that I was doing that. We did have this amazing app that we had pre downloaded, ready to go, that honestly saved us and has saved a few parents that we've talked to since then and shared it with. It's called the Huckleberry app. So, we had again pre downloaded it. And the moment she was born, to a long, long time after, up until she was a year old, we actually used that app religiously. And really, in that app, you are tracking everything for that child, from their weight to their height to their feeds to their poops to their pees,
Sleep.
sleep, medications, anything that you're giving them. Everything gets recorded in that app, so that again, when you are that newborn parent and you're really in that haze and that hard time, that rough time, that you can just keep tracking things along. So when it's time for that doctor's visit, or you need to figure out whether things are matching up for how many poops or pees your baby should have, it's actually all right there in that app for you.
Exactly. And just a little bit of a trick with that app, both of you should download it and just create one account. And then when you both log in with the same account, it actually shows you live. So, for example, if Rupali's toggle or daughter's asleep, then I'll see that live sleep timer going off. And then also, we're going to talk about a little bit about we were breastfeeding our daughter. So, if you're breastfeeding originally, there's a whole timing structure that you follow, and what breast you start on and what breast gets finished on. So that would actually get toggled, and that app, I know if I look in the app, daughter's being fed right now, then I know not to disturb
Yeah.
or stuff like
Or
that.
come in at the right time to
Come,
help
yeah,
burp and all that. Yeah.
yeah, and then I would sometimes help toggle that for Rapali so she could focus on the feed, and then from there also it would remind us, hey, start on the other side because you already fed from that other side as well.
Yeah, for both of our children, we use that app right for the first time that I breastfed both of them.
Yeah.
It was recorded in the app, and then as you shared, because sometimes you're confused, which side did I start on, which side did I finish on? Then that way you know exactly when that is. So again, that app, we made sure we kept things consistent in that app when it came to when we're changing any diapers. It's really important that, because we were staying an extra night, they had to ensure that she was drinking enough and she was slowly gaining that weight, which in the first little bit, babies lose weight a little bit before it starts going up again. So just something to note and not be afraid of. There was two different posters that really helped us in our local hospital. That one of them had really your hunger cues and full cues for the baby.
Mhm.
So crying is not a hunger cue, guys.
What?
Crying is just a way for that baby to communicate that there's something wrong, whether it's discomfort, whether it's a poop, whether it's, they want to be held, whether it's hunger. It could be anything. It could be a multitude of different things, but hunger doesn't equal, or crying doesn't mean equal hunger.
Yeah.
So for us, that poster was really helpful because it had different cues. If that baby's fists are really clenched, that means that she was hungry.
Yes.
And when they relax, the hands relax, that means that she's
content
full.
or
Yeah.
full.
Yeah.
It's like any of us, really. We all have those cues. And when I'm tired, I'll rub my eyes.
Yeah.
Child will do the same thing. So sometimes we overthink it. A quick tidbit, cool thing about the baby cries is there was a lady that was on Oprah. If you guys can look it up, I don't know her name off the top of my head, but she actually decoded babies' cries by studying and listening to what a certain cry meant.
Amazing.
Yeah, but we'll talk in a different episode about the poop and the feed cries and all that kind of stuff and what to look out for.
Yeah, the other poster that we found really helpful in our room, which we referred to multiple times, and we actually, again, when our son was born, same thing, we referred back to it, is basically the first 20 hours up until the 7 days, what you can expect when it comes to the size of the stomach, the amount of poop, the color of the poops, the amount of pees, and the mils, if you are doing formula or if you're pumping milk, the milliliters feed amounts.
Yeah, we've actually taken a picture of both those posters. We have them on our phone, and we recently sent them to the couple, our family friends that we've been kind of helping with their experience. So you'll have the essentially the one poster that you're describing with the size stomach at that point is the size of a marble. So think of the marble, that's how much milk is going to go in, and the baby's going to get full. So, like,
not much,
right? Poops in the first 24 hours, you're going to get this, like, black tar, like, poop. It's called meconium.
Meconium,
right? And that poop, it is like tar. And it's weird to see, but it's normal. It's normal. It's all the stuff that the baby's ingested within the womb, in that amniotic sac that we talked about in the other episode, and it's just all coming out now.
Yeah, and then slowly that poop will transition, from green and then eventually to that seedy yellow, which is what you want as the stomach slowly starts to develop and introduce, whether it's breast milk or formula. Yeah, so for us, that second night, it was much of the same. So again, around the clock feeding, the babies need to be fed around the clock, day and night. They need food often and in little amounts. That's why they get hungry. As Tal shared, the size of the stomach is so small. So they get hungry quickly and then they also get full really quickly. So it's just a balance, but you do need to just think about that. Once that baby's here, then you are feeding around the clock every 2 to 3 hours for a while.
And I think as a partner, you're there assisting, your wife, and you're taking care of your child. I think it's a very important part that you play is that you let her sleep, because rest is very important for milk production, for hormone regulating, all that stuff. So I think as my position as a father, as a partner, as a husband, was to keep track of that timing. Again, Huckleberry app, they're not sponsoring this, but it's an app that we love and it's free to use, so I highly recommend. But I would track, okay, it's time to feed. I would pick up our daughter from her bassinet, let Paulina, let her kind of get ready, whatever that looks like for her, and then pass over my daughter for that feed. We'll probably cover it in a whole another episode on what breastfeeding entails, all different positions. But the one thing I do want to mention in this episode, since we've already talked about it, is our daughter being a little bit jaundiced. The one side effect that I mentioned was that sleepiness was kind of hard on us in a way, and we had to learn to navigate that, to get our daughter awake enough to drink that milk, because it's very important that she stay full and have better sleep. So
yeah. And then for us, as shared, much of the same overnight and into the next day. And then on our discharge day, again, they did more blood work. We had to wait for the blood work to come back for our daughter. I was good to go. All my things looked well. I was recovering really well and was ready to go home. But for our daughter, we had to ensure and wait for that blood work to come back. And once that blood work came back clear, then we were discharged home. And before, getting to the hospital for the labor and delivery, we did have the car seat already ready to go and installed. in the car. So that's something, again, all that prep work that you've done ahead of time when it comes to having the right items in your to-go hospital bag for your baby slash diaper bag, the car seat, all those things are going to help you with, the stay in the hospital as well as the discharge
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah, so after that, we were discharged with a few different pamphlets of things like purple crying. What does that look like? Things like with the stools, making sure they were not, different or abnormal color
Yeah.
or consistency. So we were sent home with a couple of those things. And then we did get shared the resource for our public health unit. And we were told that we would be seen at the same maternity group clinic that we had seen before afterwards for the postpartum check-in for me as well as for our daughter.
And most of you all know we live in Canada, so I was provided paperwork by the hospital to register for many different government-related paperwork for our daughter. So then that was one of my jobs during the downtime. I just filled all that in, especially for birth certificate where we live.
Mm-hmm.
So for that to get registered, because in the future, if you want to take your child traveling, they need a passport. So yeah, that was something that we did at the hospital as well.
Yeah, and then again, we've shared, think about visitors. What does that look like for you? Whether you're staying in hospital for one night or two, is that something you're wanting? How many visitors do you want? And when I think about that question, really direct that question to the mom first. Because again, if that mom is feeling exhausted or is not in the right place or is really trying to figure out breastfeeding, there's so many things going on. So really just check in and make sure that the mom's okay with visitors,
Yeah.
and the visitors can wait. You really want the mom to be in a state where she's feeling comfortable and content in the way things are going, making sure that she's rested, making sure that she's getting the hang of breastfeeding, because sometimes when there's visitors, obviously it changes the mood of the room, right? And
Yeah.
how things are. Sometimes there could be pressure for you. There's timelines. With our son, as we've shared with you, with our daughter, we did have not have visitors because it was COVID. But with our son, when we did have visitors, at one point we had to just ask the visitors to leave because it was time to feed that baby,
Yeah.
and I wanted to be comfortable and I wanted to breastfeed that baby. And instead of instead of being uncomfortable or just not feeling like I can say something, we just asked them to leave.
Yeah. If you're a listener that's a visitor or an upcoming visitor of a family member having a baby, yeah, just be mindful and respectful of those new parents. It's a very new experience for most. It's challenging at times. Like Rapali mentioned, like they're at their most vulnerable state, especially if they're breastfeeding and all this kind of stuff. So please just be aware of that. Don't get upset if they say no. Wait, you'll
And
get to see the baby and you'll get to see the parents.
yeah, it's a delicate time, so try not to be in the way and just try to be there as, a helping hand and just someone that has a comfortable and calm presence in that time, because it is a very delicate time. So yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And if you're a parent, please don't be apologetic. Like, just you're a new parent, you're exhausted. I know we recently had a parent say, "Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't get to, answer your phone call or text." I said, "Hey, no, look, I've been there. You take your time. I understand, and just know that it's okay to let people know that it's time for them to go and you need your space. Even if you're home or at the hospital, just ask, communicate, be comfortable. It's a very vulnerable time for the both of you."
Yeah. And for us, during the 2 days, the 48 hours or maybe less than that we stayed in the hospital, we had in the hospital bag, we had things like snacks. Obviously, there was meals provided. So for Tal, he didn't actually really eat much, but thankfully there was a cafeteria
Hmm.
downstairs that you could grab food. There was a Starbucks, so we could grab some coffee and tea, which was really helpful for us. And if visitors are there, ask them if you want them to bring something. When it comes to food, ask them, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you need, just ask for that so that that can be provided for you. It is really important that you make sure that you're well nourished, you are well hydrated, not just the mom but also the dad, because it's both. We both need to take care of ourselves so then we can best
Yeah.
take care of the baby.
And then just lastly, I want to mention is if you do have questions, talk to your nursing staff. They're there to help you. And these maternity nurses and doctors are phenomenal people, well trained, and they see so many different births. Children and parents come through their units. So, if you're new to this and you're unsure, like just ask, and I'm sure they'll love to help you out.
Yeah, ask questions. And before discharge, if you know that, okay, today I'm going to be discharged, if there's any questions that are coming to mind, just make a list for yourself.
Hmm.
So when that, the doctor comes in or when the nurse comes in, that all those questions get asked. One of the things that for our daughter we did get done in the hospital as well is that hearing test. So that's something that you may expect, is that hearing test to be done, and she passed that as well. So yeah.
Exactly. And if you're using that Huckleberry app, you notice something you're unsure about, let's say for example a poop, is it supposed to look like this? Just make a note, because you'll forget. And when the nurse comes in, you can be like, oh yeah, let me look at my note in the app. Oh, it said it was supposed to be seedy yellow, it was brown, it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
Or take a picture. We all have our phones on, so that's really helpful too.
and then just enjoy that time at the hospital with your family, with your new family, if it's your first child, and just be with your partner and embrace it. And it's just gonna get more interesting after that. Let's just say that.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's about to get a whole lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening. And as always, please provide us with any feedback that you have, any topics. We had a few topics that, have come in since we've started. So if you think of something, please come in. There's a long list of topics. And we were just talking about the other day that I don't think we'll ever run out of things to talk about. So please keep listening. Please keep encouraging us. It's really helpful, and it motivates us to keep going. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.